Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Can I just make sure that you can hear me at the back? If you could just raise your hands, and I know that we're all communicating. My name is Brenda Emmanus. I'm the Arts, Culture and Entertainment Correspondent for BBC London News. It is indeed an honour to be part of this very exciting and rather special and unique meeting of minds. We are, as art practitioners and promoters and preservers of culture, have come together to assess museums and the cultural landscape, and have witnessed or are learning how the 21st century museums have moved beyond their traditional core roles of conserving and promoting collections. Like the towns and cities and communities which they serve, they've had to evolve. And in order to survive, they've got to remain relevant, which is one of the reasons that we are here and discussing it. The fact that so many of us have come from all around the world to this beautiful city of Milan to talk about the significance and value of our great cultural institutions, big and small, is indeed testament to their value and to the huge potential they have to impact on the communities which they serve. Now, in this plenary session, we'll discuss the social role of museums, new migration, and the challenges and, of course, the opportunities which they present. I am honoured to present to you a very distinguished panel who will, I hope, inspire you enough to engage with us and ask your questions afterwards. They'll each give a presentation, and then I'll open to the floor for you to engage and share your views and opinions. I'd like to start by just introducing all four in one go, and then they'll give their presentation separately. We have, to my right, Giusi Nicolini, who's the mayor of Lampedusa and Linosa in Italy. She's currently and constantly in the spotlight on the issue of migration due to the proximity of those Italian islands to the African coastline, but also because of her compassion and commitment to the cause. She's assumed the role of spokesperson for the defense of human rights of migrants within Europe. In 2016, she received the French Simone de Beauvoir Award. Before focusing on politics, Giusi worked on several local press publications, including Ambiente, Dualmia, and L'Isola di Calypso. My Italian is not fluent. Was that okay? Can I give her a round of applause and thank her for coming, please? To my immediate left, we have David Fleming. David is the Director of National Museums Liverpool and President of the Federation of International Human Rights Museums. He became Director of the National Museums Liverpool in 2001, and since his arrival, he supervised the completion of several major capital projects, including the £45 million Into the Future project, which featured major refurbishment of both the Walker Art Gallery and World Museum, and the opening of the International Slavery Museum and the £75 million development of the Museum of Liverpool. He's president of the UK Museums Association and has served on several government committees and task force. Ladies and gentlemen, David Fleming. Also to my left, we have Marlen Mouliou. She's professor of the Faculty of History and Archaeology at the National and Kapodistrian University of Athens in Greece. Since 2013, she has been a full-time lecturer of museology at the museum. And Marlen is the chair of the International Committee for the Collections and Activities of Museums in Cities, which is CAMOC, and she holds a PhD in Museum Studies from the University of Leicester, and she was one of the founding members of the Greek scientific journal Tetraidia Mouliou. Is that correct? Excuse my pronunciation. Ladies and gentlemen, Marlen Mouliou. And last and not least, to my right is Robin Hirst, who's the Director of Collections, Research and Exhibitions at the Museum in Victoria. Robin leads the Museum Victoria's research program, the development, management and conservation of the state's collection, and the exhibition program for Melbourne Museum, Science Works and the Immigration Museum. He's responsible for the development of print publications, planetarium shows and online content. He fosters a cooperative and collaborative culture to achieve this success, and Robin served as president of the International Council of Museums. Robin is also the chair of the Cultural Heritage and Museum Studies Advisory Committee of Deakin University and serves on cultural committees of the University of Melbourne and the RMIT University. Ladies and gentlemen, Robin Hirst. So if Giusi would kindly start with her presentation, which will be in Italian, so I hope you, if you're not fluent, you have your little machines.
Buongiorno a tutti, grazie. Io non sono un'esperta d'arte o di musei, sono venuta qui a raccontare come abbiamo costruito a Lampedusa il museo archeologico e il museo della fiducia e del dialogo nel Mediterraneo. La mia isola, la state vedendo, è un'isola molto africana nella natura e nel paesaggio ed è molto più vicina all'Africa che alla Sicilia. Questa che vedete è la riserva naturale dell'isola, dove depone le uova tartaruga marina, è un nodo molto importante nelle migrazioni animali e quindi anche nelle migrazioni umane che in questo momento interessano il Mediterraneo. Sono diventata sindaco nel maggio 2012 ed era un momento in cui ancora ogni volta che c'era un naufragio, ogni volta che accadeva qualcosa di molto grave nella mia isola, avevo la sensazione che Lampedusa fosse sola al mondo. Poi è arrivato il 2013, a Lampedusa è venuto Papa Francesco per denunciare che nel Mediterraneo stavano accadendo cose molto brutte e una cosa molto brutta accadde poi nell'ottobre 2013, un grande naufragio dal quale furono però portati a terra 366 cadaveri. Quello fu un momento in cui l'attenzione, l'indignazione dell'opinione pubblica ha fatto scoprire questa isola che per tanti anni da sola aveva accolto, mentre tutti gli altri avevano chiuso le frontiere. Ecco. Però poi i naufragi si sono susseguiti, i morti continuano, tutti i giorni lo vedete. Non era sufficiente più dal mio punto di vista che Lampedusa, sì, è necessario e doveroso che continuasse ad accogliere, ma non era più sufficiente la denuncia, l'urlo o la proposta delle cose da fare. Occorrono gesti e azioni visibili sul territorio che parlino anche un linguaggio positivo, che facciano vedere la luce alla fine di questo tunnel in cui sembriamo essere caduti dentro. Così innanzitutto abbiamo lottato per aprire il primo museo archeologico di Lampedusa, perché quell'isola doveva recuperare la sua memoria, la sua storia, perché sia i lampedusani, ma tutti i turisti e tutti quelli che passano da Lampedusa dovevano capire che Lampedusa era sempre stato quello nella storia, una zattera tra due continenti. Questo era sempre stato. E poi a primo piano di questo edificio che avete già visto abbiamo voluto realizzare questa mostra internazionale inaugurata dal presidente Mattarella, che racconta i legami, gli incontri, gli incroci, le radici comuni del Mediterraneo, mettendo insieme tante forme espressive diverse. È stato un lavoro molto di squadra tra enti pubblici, innanzitutto il Ministero dei Beni Culturali italiano, la Regione Siciliana che era proprietaria della struttura del museo, la Soprintendenza di Agrigento, l'Istituto Italiano di Cultura a Tunisi, i musei. Il museo capofila è stato il Museo degli Uffizi, che su questi temi è molto avanti perché è stato vittima nel 92 di attentati terroristici mafiosi, il bardo di Tunisi che è stato vittima molto di recente di attentati terroristici, il Museum di Marsiglia, Venezia e altri musei della Sicilia. Tutti hanno prestato le loro opere, sono opere importanti come il Caravaggio, che voleva ricordare Aylan, ma soprattutto indicare la necessità che questo bambino si svegli, che si svegli l'umanità che abbiamo sepolto sotto il mare insieme a tutti i morti che continuiamo ad ignorare. E poi ci sono il pane, il sale, ci sono foto che raccontano il lavoro e ci sono anche oggetti, disegni che raccontano delle migrazioni, perché comunque quello non lo dobbiamo mai dimenticare. Questo museo è stato inaugurato il 3 giugno e ha già tanti visitatori, sia di lampedusani e anche bambini che vengono alle attività che svolgiamo. È un'operazione importante anche perché ha messo insieme il privato sociale, l'associazione che ha curato la mostra e che in questo momento gestisce il museo, un'associazione privata, Hirst Social Life, totalmente a costo zero per il comune, perché questo è un grave momento per l'economia dei bilanci comunali. Stiamo lanciando un manifesto perché finora il miracolo è riuscito, però questo miracolo deve vivere, deve sopravvivere, deve contribuire a trasformare Lampedusa da frontiera, da confine, in centro e in avanguardia, perché se Lampedusa non la possiamo spostare da lì, per fortuna che non si può spostare da lì, perché altrimenti i morti sarebbero molti di più. Occorre che la frontiera, durante la mia presentazione si diceva che sono stata molto impegnata sui temi dei migranti, ma in realtà la liberazione, l'affermazione dei diritti umani e la liberazione dal destino di frontiera sono la stessa cosa. Per me questo museo vuole affermare proprio questo, che i diritti o sono di tutti o non sono di nessuno, e che è sbagliato, disumano, ingiusto continuare a ritenere che ci siano persone superflue in questo momento, di cui non solo si può fare a meno, ma che possano, piuttosto che decidere di governare i flussi migratori e stabilire delle regole sul diritto d'asilo, pensare di poter selezionare i flussi ed eliminare la parte che riteniamo superflua dell'umanità in questo modo ignobile di cui un giorno ci vergogneremo. Ecco, questo museo deve servire a questo e al riscatto della mia isola, perché non sia mai più sola al mondo. Grazie.
Thank you very much, Giusi. I think you can see by the response that everyone's been hugely inspired by what you had to say, as you can. I think this is an applause that can probably go on for about an hour, so may I take charge and just ask you to hold on for a while, because we have a very short amount of time. I have two questions before I open up. Can we have a couple from the audience, and then we'll move on to our next speaker. And once they've all spoken, then we will allow everybody to engage with every one of you. My immediate question to you, Lucy, and there's a saying that diamonds do not come as big as bricks, and you've proven that as a very small island that there's some very valuable lessons to learn in the way museums can embrace this change. What do you think are the fundamental and most important lessons that you can share with museums, great, big or smaller than yourselves? And also, how do you go about engaging these communities who have other priorities? The migrants, they've just come to the island, their priorities must be food and shelter. How do you engage them with the museum?
Ma intanto avete visto nelle foto che ci sono anche ragazzi migranti che sono venuti spontaneamente a vedere il museo. Abbiamo in mente adesso di attivare un programma di iniziative, di attività. Questo museo deve diventare un motore di cultura e di incontri, no? Sul territorio, ma anche non solo tra lampedusani e migranti, perché questo incontro c'è ormai da 20 anni, ma tra i turisti e i migranti. Cioè, quello che è importante per me è che chi arriva a Lampedusa dalle più diverse parti d'Italia e dall'anno scorso anche da qualche paese d'Europa li incontri, li veda e non abbia più paura. Quello che si impara a Lampedusa è molto facile da imparare a Lampedusa, è capire le ragioni di questi viaggi, perché li vedi arrivare lì e capisci che non hanno davvero un'altra alternativa e niente li fermerà mai. L'altra cosa che impari è che loro, quando arrivano a Lampedusa, che cos'altro ci chiedono se non di avere salva la vita. Ecco, l'abbiamo chiamato Museo della Fiducia e del Dialogo. Che cos'è la fiducia se non quello che i naufraghi ripongono nei soccorritori a mare? È questo. E il modo in cui noi li accogliamo fa poi la differenza rispetto al resto. Farà la differenza su che cittadini diventeranno. Agli altri musei del Mediterraneo noi stiamo lanciando adesso un manifesto proprio per strutturare e far sopravvivere questo museo di Lampedusa, un manifesto per il museo di Lampedusa che chieda aiuto, chieda di entrare in rete e di diventare luogo dove si scambiano e ci si incontra dalle più diverse parti. Finora appunto abbiamo fatto incontrare il Bardo con gli Uffizi, è stato bellissimo vedere l'incontro tra il direttore degli Uffizi e il direttore del Bardo, proprio è stato commovente vederli. Questo, Lampedusa che diventa incrocio, perché quando ci si incontra non importa quello che accadrà, sicuramente nessuno è più lo stesso di prima dopo aver incontrato l'altro. Così i lampedusani non sono più gli stessi. E anche chi passa da Lampedusa, ecco, non è più lo stesso. Vogliamo che questo cambiamento avvenga finalmente in positivo e non più per odiarci, per spaventarci, per avere paura l'uno dell'altro. Mi sembrano queste le risposte che le uniche risposte che dai piccoli territori possono venire. Cioè, ma anche sulla lotta alla tratta di esseri umani o la lotta alla desertificazione. Cosa volete che un posto piccolo come Lampedusa o le tante Lampedusa del Mediterraneo possano fare per cambiare? Pochissimo, ma quel poco che possono fare intanto si somma al poco di tutti gli altri, ma può diventare simbolico, può essere di esempio e quindi ha un valore grande. Ecco, questo è quello che penso.
Thank you. Thank you. Can we take a couple of questions from the floor, please? Anyone have an immediate question which they'd like to pose? No? Fine. Well, oh, you have? No. Okay, let's move on then, please, to David Fleming, Director of Museums of Liverpool, UK.
Okay, well, it's not easy following Mayor Nicolini, who I'm sure has the respect of everybody here in the audience. Nonetheless, I want to begin talking about the social role of museums, and I want to begin with a quotation. What am I pointing this at? Oh, I'm sorry. The quote says, this isn't working. The quote reads, "This course has opened my eyes. Never before thought of museums as being harbingers of change in anything." Oh, there we are. It's from the massive open online course currently being run. You can still study on this course, Behind the Scenes of the 21st Century Museum. Comment made by Lee Scott. He later wrote, "Yes, my opinion has changed, and I'm much more convinced that museums have a positive role to play in achieving and enhancing social cohesion. I had been stuck in my 60s experience of the passive museum, storing items for the mere sake of storage," he wrote. "Today, they are put to use to make a positive difference in the world." Interesting commentary from somebody who's been around in museums for a long time, recognizing that our role has changed significantly in his lifetime. I'd like to quote from Professor Richard Sandel, also of Leicester University. He wrote, "Recent years have seen an explosion of interest in the relationship between museums, human rights, and social justice. The idea that museums can positively impact individuals' lives and bring benefit to society at large is one that has taken hold and gained increasing consensus across museum practitioners and policymakers internationally. In 2014, the UK's Museums Association launched Museums Change Lives, a new vision for the social impact of museums. They can enhance the well-being of individuals, they can create and contribute to better places in which people live, and they can inspire people and ideas. Recent years have seen the emergence of an activist museum practice, one that seeks to use the resources of the museum to contribute purposefully and actively towards a more fair and just society." So, social justice is a term that we often use, and I have to say it's a very contested term. We all mean something slightly different when we use it, and a lot depends upon what country we are in and what political system we live under. Here, for example, are some American terms and definitions. Social justice is civil rights. Social justice is protecting poor people, the downtrodden, those who can't help themselves. Social justice is the ability people have to realize their potential. "Here is a rule that I learned in my study of communist societies," wrote one respondent. "Social justice means left-wing equality. There is no social justice if there are rich and poor." So the term crops up in a variety of contexts, such as faith, health, economics, politics, and the environment. What I mean when I use the term social justice is equality of access to what museums do and how museums should behave to create this, and addressing social ills, perhaps even campaigning to right those ills. It is important to remember that it depends where you are. Social justice in a war-torn region, for example, might look very different from that in a peaceful Western democracy. What and how? There are some examples. Racism, homophobia, modern slavery. These ills are found in nations all over the world. The International Slavery Museum in Liverpool, for example, is a campaigning museum that fights against racism and other human rights abuses, such as people trafficking, through its exhibitions, debates, events. Here are some slides from the International Slavery Museum. So you see, it's not just about transatlantic slavery. Okay, I'll go back to that one. Well, here are some other examples of modern museum work in difficult areas which are looking to address access, inequality, injustice. For example, here in Belfast, Silent Testimony was an exhibition of essentially people affected by the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So portraits of people, very moving exhibition of portraits which gave lots of people, for the first time, the opportunity to think about what the Troubles in Northern Ireland meant to them. And we also have a photograph of the aftermath of a bombing in Belfast. Something which affected me very greatly in Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, looking back on the wars in the Balkans. An exhibition that had a very profound effect on me, an exhibition of artworks by young Albanian teenagers in the National Historical Museum of Tirana. They were asked to mount an exhibition of in a museum. What are the current issues that worry you in modern Albania? Answer, simple answer, corruption. Corruption all over the place, and a very powerful and moving exhibition there. Tbilisi in Georgia, Museum of Soviet Occupation, another very moving perspective on very difficult times for Georgian citizens. And so we come to the key issue of our age, migration, the key issue of our age, I think. This is a highly politically charged issue, but there is a growing feeling in the museum world that we do have a role to play in enlightening people about migration, not least because museums often take a long view of social and economic development. Because of this, museums are well placed to explore the long-term complexities of migration. It's not just all about instant headlines in newspapers. There are a number of museums around the world that look in some detail at different aspects of migration, for example, those in Melbourne, Australia, Bremerhaven in Germany, São Paulo in Brazil. More are being created, for example, in London and in Malmö in Sweden. In Liverpool, we have for many years had an emigration gallery in the Merseyside Maritime Museum. These museums all look at identity and other cultural aspects of the movement of people, which is, after all, an endemic part of the human condition. These movements have had a great variety of causes, and some of them, for example, the movement across the Atlantic Ocean of Africans in the 16th to the 19th centuries that is better known as the transatlantic slave trade, and which is looked at in some detail in Liverpool's International Slavery Museum, were enforced, not voluntary. It is rare that mass migrations such as those of Muslims and Hindus after the partition of India in 1947 do not have a profound impact on nations. Often this impact is such that ethnic and religious tensions can survive for hundreds of years. The world is full of such tensions. Modern migrations within Europe really are nothing new from this perspective, nor are the tensions they create. Finally, as long as we have museums that are dedicated to human migration, run by people who are prepared for the challenges and opposition they will inevitably face, and who believe in the museum as a campaigning agent of change, fighting for social justice, then we can hope that those who argue against migration will lose the arguments and be shown up as the narrow-minded bigots and racists that they really are. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. Are there any questions immediately from the floor? We'll take a couple.
Here. Come here.
There's a lady here.
My name is Itala Vivan from the University of Milan, Italy. I have a question for David Fleming, as a director of the National Museums of Liverpool, about the International Slavery Museum, which encountered some criticism when it opened in 2007 because of lack of participation from the part of the population, the community of Liverpool, especially, the community of African descent. And I would like to know whether what has been done towards improving this situation. Thank you.
It is working. I don't recognize that situation. There are always disputes. These are contested areas, and there's always somebody somewhere who's upset. In fact, we are very well integrated, I would argue, and if anybody was here from the black community in Liverpool, I would ask them to stand up and explain to us exactly what the problems were perceived to be in 2007, because I don't honestly recognize them. Having said that, it is a common refrain in museum work that we don't integrate ourselves properly with the communities that we're looking at. I don't think that's an accusation that can be leveled at the International Slavery Museum, but I do absolutely accept the point that it's a great danger for museums.
Can I ask you a question? I'm a great fan of the book Who Moved My Cheese, and change is always difficult for some people. Some people embrace it, some people are resistant. Do you feel sometimes, like as museums, you're sort of stuck in the middle between trying to serve the communities and also deal with the rather outmoded models that can be the preserve of museums, roles which people want to hold on to, the hierarchy, the elite, the romanticism of old museums? How do you navigate that space in between?
Yes, well, I mean, the answer is running modern museums is difficult because the world is full of opinions, and many of them will argue against the opinions and the decisions that we're making in museums. The traditional museum was very alienated from all communities, generally speaking, apart from perhaps the scholastic communities. Modern museums have to behave very differently, and in behaving differently, we have to have courage to have arguments and debates, because we are entering contested areas. We're leaving the safety of scholarship behind, if there's such a thing as the safe scholarship. Of course, scholars are among the most fierce rivals in the world. Nonetheless, once we start engaging in real social issues, we have to deal with real people, and that is a challenge for lots of traditionally trained museum people. But we have to show courage, we have to be involved, and we have to take on exactly the kind of issues that we've just been asked about there. In particular, I mean, I do remember there being suspicions about the Slavery Museum from the black community, thinking that this is going to be a white person's enterprise that's patronising black people. Who's making money out of it, I remember being asked. So if these are the kind of questions you're talking about, we didn't recognise them as stopping us. In fact, we had to be very bold and brave and say, no, this is a really important initiative, and we'd like you all to come with us and be integrated in what we're doing. That's what's happened. In fact, several million people have visited that museum, and it's the museum with the highest visitorship of BAME people in Liverpool of all the museums that we have in the area. So it's clearly having some kind of an impact. But the answer to your question is that we operate in difficult, contested areas if we're dealing with social justice and human rights.
Persistence overcomes resistance. We have a question.
Thank you very, very much, David. Your work is absolutely well known, and I think you've done fantastic work, and is always cited as one of the best practices. Just a very simple question. When you are talking about, the contestations that you have in such museums, and you refer to, we have done this, we have done this. What do you mean by we? Is this we the curators, we the directors? How do you ensure in such a contested area, in such a diversified city, that you do it with them rather than for them?
Thank you. Well, yes, I mean, I could speak for days answering that question, but I will try to be very brief. What I mean by we, particularly in the context of the Slavery Museum and our human rights work there, is very much all the staff and people involved at National Museums Liverpool and the black community. For example, we try to... It's very easy to say that we have good connections with the black community. We have good connection with individuals who are black, who live in Liverpool, and they are not necessarily representative of everybody, but we do our best. The mistake we could make is to be frightened of the complexities and tensions that this kind of work involves. It's difficult work. It's very difficult to please everybody. We probably don't please everybody. Sometimes we probably please nobody, but we mustn't avoid the work. So we do try to be as inclusive as possible, not just... so I think my own personal views must be important in these, and I think the culture of the organisation is important. There's no escaping that fact. People have to hope that I, as it were, have a generosity of approach. If I don't have a generosity approach, then I'll probably fail in what I'm trying to do. So I feel the need to be inclusive, and that's a fairly trite response to your question. I understand exactly what you're getting at, and we do our best, but it's really not easy.
Thank you, David. I'd like to move on now to Dr. Marlen Mouliou, from Chair of Camp Hoc and a lecturer at the University of Athens.
I thank ICOM for organizing this panel in such an important subject. And I feel really already overwhelmed by what I heard from Mrs. Nicolini and my colleague David Fleming, and the massive work they are doing in different fields. There are two ways to take up the challenge, this truly challenging task the panel presents. Is either to tell the story as it is, or to claim that the story is as we tell it. I'll choose the latter, for I do not believe in absolute objective truths or interpretations. I'll try to outline the subject from a personal point of view, also helped by the work we develop in CAMOC, admitting, of course, the inevitability of my premises and the impossibility of covering in just a few minutes this complex and fluid matter in all its diversity. In order to set some coordinates to the vast map of issues at stake and to my thoughts in relation to the matter, I'll choose two overriding concepts and principles: context and process. First, because thinking of the context of any issue is fundamental for new thinking and understanding to arise, and also because change, any transformation in fact, raises the question of process, on how we construct our thoughts and actions based on certain premises and our own dance with these premises. So what is the context this new reality takes place? The entire world is witnessing a huge humanitarian refugee crisis, by far the largest movement of people, migrants and refugees Europe has seen since 1945. Yet very few of us are eyewitnesses of refugees' ordeal and desperate struggle to begin a new life in safer lands. We create and filter our perceptions based on non-direct experiences, mostly through world media, whose compelling power and stories invade our screens, TV screens, computer screens, and our minds. Since 2012, the number of refugees increased 550 to 600 times, a huge increase. Most new refugees today are victims of a merciless war, yet the most long-lasting generator of refugees and migrants is poverty, which is spread like a disease. This forced displacement turned the Mediterranean to a massive watery grave. The numbers are self-telling. This crisis has ignited a number of other issues with their own effects. I try to outline them here. It's quite condensed, this slide, but I give it as a context of this situation. Yet, in this context, what is the role of museums? As UK's Museum Association Director a few days ago stated, in the aftermath of the UK referendum, and I quote, "Immigration was clearly a huge issue in the referendum, and many people had questions, doubts, and fears on the subject. Museums are ideally placed to host these conversations with their local communities." End of quote. And I say, we cannot disregard politics and social divisions. We must face them straight ahead and try to see what citizens don't see, what causes blindness or ignorance, and prepare effective remedies to start the healing process. Museums all over the world, and of course Europe at this moment, have become hugely involved with contemporary debates on migration and the life experiences of refugees, and developed in the last decade really impressive amount of work, numerous inside and on-site participatory projects on migration, issues of identity and belonging. There has been also a number of key publications on museum politics of identity and belonging, many European projects focusing on the intercultural social dialogue promoted by museums. Just a month ago, NEMO published a text of recommendations for museums' work on migration and cultural diversity, drawing from work produced by the German Museum Association in 2014. And the day of the UK referendum, the Open Museum in Glasgow, which runs many inspiring projects with migrants and refugees, has completed yet another one. And here we see in this slide a group of young Iranian refugees who created and delivered public museum tours featuring objects they were interested in as part of the Scottish Refugee Council's Refugee Festival. Global diasporas, memory and democracy in the urban context, and the importance of participatory citizen work in museums are top issues on CAMOC's agenda, on our agenda in the International Committee for City Museums. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. All the museums do really impressive and promising work, but it feels like the good work museums already do is not enough, or is not reaching out everyone, not only the communities at risk, but also individuals and communities that are misled by stereotypes and dividing political rhetoric. Museums need to build strong connections within the entire human ecosystem in order to make everyone understand that migration is a universal human condition. Systemic thinking reminds us that the first thing we recognize when we observe an ecosystem is that it's not just a collection of species, but it's a community, which means that its members all depend on one another. They're all interconnected in a vast network of relationships, the web of life, as the systemic theorists say. One of the key characteristics the life has is the spontaneous emergence of new order. And here I turn to the issue of process, which involves several distinct stages. Many stages, I will not go into detail about this because it's quite complex and theoretical perhaps at this moment, but we can start from the first stage, which requires openness within any organization, openness to change, and reaches this last phase when the system breaks through to a new order and emerges of something new, something really innovative and creative. Are museums in this phase of creativity? Are we able to think differently and futurize our museum's practice? Can we see the blind spots of society on migration and move to adaptive change? The Museums and Migration Co-Creative Workshop organized by CAMOC and the Open Museum in Glasgow last November raises a lot of these issues and produced some very interesting collective work. Workshop participants were asked to write their thoughts, concerns, and questions about migration and museums on post-it notes and thought clouds, following a set of presentations and associated discussion groups. They were also involved in small group discussions. My colleagues from the Open Museum visualized the core content of this work in 2 word clouds, which I present here. Center Place holds the issue of representation of migrant stories, which is anyway at the center of the work museums do already. Another word cloud stands and provides that the prominent is the value of communities and their stories, the formation of the museum as a garden or a hearth, as a community space, where human stories are shared with or without objects at hand. What I find even more interesting is that most of the comments indicate, and I have a lot of comments in this slide, perhaps we can return to those after, a lot of these comments indicate the need to clarify processes, analyze the quest for a better social and museum practice in this domain, and effectively create an observing framework through which we can make sense of our work. This work extends beyond the traditional curation of objects or even of objects with stories and highlights the need for museums to curate human relationships. Diversity or hyperdiversity is the mindset and reality within which we can understand and practice museum work nowadays. The challenge is to use both the right and left sides of our brains and create mental and emotional collective mapping schemes for museum work in order to curate stories that bring together diverse migrant and non-migrant experiences. The challenge is also to trace the social changes that are happening now in society, the current context, and discuss diversity in connection with these key issues like the one of security and world peace, and develop processes and projects that reflect on all these different complex issues. Museums must dare to invite audiences to disagree and value different contributions. And museum staff and academics working in and on the theme of migration must also want to share as many experiences and knowledge as they can. CAMOC, with the project on migration in cities, which will kickstart very soon, a promising project, aims to create this kind of sharing platform. In a recent, very interesting conversation I had with the head of ActionAid Greece about the refugee crisis, its own humanitarian work in refugee camps in Greece, and his appraisal of the social work offered by NGOs and museums, he mentioned that for him, the best museum example in relation to migration and asylum seekers is the Humanity House in The Hague, for its very experiential exhibitions and programs. Yet, even if the experiences provided by the house are realistic and disturbing, they remain safe simulations of the refugee reality. More than 250 refugees interviewed individually or in focus groups in a research undertaken by ActionAid Greece, a report that was published just 2 weeks ago, provides their voices for their dramas and traumas. and send their own dramatic messages to Europe. In this report, we have these 6 different types of messages which I want to share with you, their voice. Most of the above messages are not services offered by museums, yet museums can amplify the voices of refugees, asylum seekers and migrants and play a proactive role so that their messages get across to wider society. To say it in the words of one of my colleagues and participants in the Glasgow workshop, and I quote, "Museums must create spaces for people to be and share the best of who they are. They must be places for compassion and humanity." Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marlen. Are there any immediate questions from the floor? If not, then I'd like to ask you one. Throughout history, forced mass movements of people have created heritage at the time and retrospectively. Do you think museums, it's imperative that they are proactive in seeking these out? And also, what do you think, if there is resistance, you have to present the case. We talked about value this morning. So what do you think as the long-term sort of benefits and advantages of embracing these new cultures, this cultural diversity, if you were to have to present the business case?
I think this is really what we need to do. And museums have already started doing it in many different ways. We saw wonderful examples from David, and there are many examples from all over the world. What I feel at this very moment is that this huge and important work museums do does not reach out to all society. Historical information about the history of refugee is very important so that we all understand that this is not a recent phenomenon. It has always been, and we always migrate, not only because of war, but also because it's good to migrate. It's very important that we meet other people and interact. We are becoming only richer. Museums do that, but perhaps this message must come across in a different way. And also museums must realize that these messages are not always very clear to the people that are more resistant in society. I don't know how difficult it is. I have not tried it myself. I would very much like to do that. Bring together communities that disagree. Not only communities that are in need of help from museums, of NGOs, communities at risk, but people, representatives from a society that have completely different opinion and sit together at the same table and perhaps not at the beginning discuss, but really debate on what museums can offer, or what do they want from museums to do for them, and how society must be different so that we are all more harmonious in this web of life that we have to create.
Do you think otherwise we end up preaching to the converted all the time? It's a constant case of preaching to the converted.
Yes.
Wonderful, thank you. Any question? Oh, I have a question on the floor, thank you.
Lucía Astudillo, de Ecuador. Quería comentarle que también creo que somos un planeta migrante, y en el Ecuador, que somos un país dolarizado, tenemos muchos migrantes, especialmente en el sur del Perú, que vienen al Ecuador. Y entonces los museos, por más pequeños que seamos, podemos contribuir en algo a un cambio. Y nosotros estamos trabajando con los jóvenes migrantes peruanos en el museo, dándoles espacio e incentivándoles para que continúen el trabajo escolar, porque muchos de los migrantes jóvenes bajo los 16 años están trabajando, y eso no está bien, pero el museo puede contribuir, por más pequeños que sean nuestros museos. Gracias. Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much for this information. I have been in Brazil last year also, and I know that wonderful innovative work is being undertaken by the Museum of Migration in Sao Paulo, and I'm sure many other museums that are supporting human rights are doing similar work. This is what we need to continue doing and perhaps do it even more intensively, involving, as I said before, also members of the society that disagree, that they have different opinions.
Thank you very much, Marlen. I'd like to move on because time, like museums, are precious. We move on to Robin Hirst, Director of Collections, Research and Exhibitions at the Museum Victoria.
Thank you very much. What I will do is I'll talk a little bit about Museum Victoria very briefly, Australia generally, and then the Immigration Museum and some of the very recent programs, 3 particular examples. This is my office. I work in Melbourne Museum. This is the state's major museum. We also run Science Works, the state's Centre for Science and Technology, the Immigration Museum, which David Fleming referred to, and we also have the World Heritage listed Royal Exhibition Building as part of our portfolio. Melbourne is in the southeast of Australia, and it's an island continent that's as big as Europe. And I'd like to remind you that the people of Australia today are all immigrants or descended from immigrants, except for 3%. And those 3% are the Aboriginal Australians whose descendants have for 60,000 years occupied the land. So that the settlement or invasion of Australia, depending on your viewpoint, 230 years ago, it's still a matter that is very much in contention today. There's no mention of the traditional owners of the land in the Australian Constitution. There's no treaty. So many different languages were spoken by the Indigenous people, some 300 in all, and many are still spoken today. In the words of the local Aboriginal language from where I come from, I wish you Wominjeka, which means hello. I raise this point around the Indigenous populations because in a 60,000 year history, a mere 200 years of European settlement could be called recent immigration. It's all relative. Now let's look at some recent immigration in European time and the role of our Immigration Museum. Australia is in so many ways a good example of cultures living harmoniously together. A multicultural Australia is embraced by both sides of government, and successive governments have invested heavily in the idea. And there has been a break from the discriminatory immigration policies of the past, and compared to many other countries, our population lives in harmony. However, there are always tensions around new immigrants, new religions, and xenophobia is often lurking. 1 in 4 of the current population of my state, Victoria, was born overseas. 1/4 of homes speak a language other than English. These are Italian, you'll be pleased to hear, Greek, Mandarin, Vietnamese, Cantonese, Arabic and Turkish. They're the most popular, but 1 in 4 homes speak a language other than English. So we do continue in general to welcome migrants. The Immigration Museum was established at the end of last century, but what a different world we live in today, just 20 years on. And the museum itself is in a state of transition. It began telling the traditional migration narrative, leaving the journey, arriving, settling. But we've steadily transformed, and we're now looking at the legacy of migration and exploring contemporary issues and tackling racism. We are moving from observers to participants, from narrators to characters, from immigration to cultural diversity, and taking on that role of an agent for social change. Let me just illustrate this by 3 projects, and I won't go into detail. You can look at them up on the website. But we have successfully launched Identity, Yours, Mine, Ours, which explores themes relating to personal identity, belonging and difference in contemporary Australia. And its core aims were to provide a dynamic and participatory environment to encourage reflection about our assumptions and compels visitors to think about the ways they might affect positive change. Key message in the exhibition is I belong, do you? So this captures the interactive approach, and these were some of the posters that were used in promoting the exhibition. Ethnicity, language, spirituality, ancestry and citizenship have and will continue to inform our individual and collective identities in Australia. The exhibition had several themes. The first was visible identities, first impressions. How we so rapidly can construct people's identity from what we see. The second theme, People Like Me, explores forms of belonging. And People Like Them, the third theme, explores notions of difference. So the exhibition does more than simply use numerous individual stories to remind and inform visitors that we are a multicultural country. It enables a more deeper, more intimate and emotional connection beyond the surface of cognitive learning. So the exhibition aims to facilitate discussion and debate on social action in the community. There are timelines that map our migration policies and past racism within those migration policies. But one of the key moments is a film we made about a racist incident on a tram. Trams are ultimately the iconic form of transport in Melbourne, also in Milan, I see. But so this is a racist act, and it takes the viewpoint of an observer. In fact, it takes the viewpoint of several observers and analyses their reactions and asks the audience how would they feel about this. And finally, on leaving the exhibition, a pledge can be made around how they might change behaviour. I just want then quickly to talk about another program which is especially we use with youth to talk about issues around racism, discrimination, social inclusion, social exclusion, health, diversity, etc. And it's got three main components, and one of them is a booth where students can actually record their own, not stories, but answer questions around how they feel about certain issues. And this then provides us with a lot of the content. It also, this project also offers a fellowship to artists to work with students to look at how they can look at their identity in a very positive way and use their chosen art practice to communicate positive images of diversity. And the final component is the website, and I'd encourage you to have a look if you want. It is bringing out into the open a lot of the things that do tend to remain on the surface, but dealing with them in a very healthy way. So as we noted earlier, Australia is an island, and many have risked and lost their lives seeking asylum to Australia. And there is an increasingly strict policy on border protection, and that is, seems to be pretty well much universal. And it's got bipartisan support across the nation's parliament. And it finds many would-be refugees in detention. And this is a hugely contentious issue in Australia. But we're working on an exhibition called Behind the Wire. And this is based on oral histories of people who have been held and are being held in mandatory detention. We will take their stories and bring them out in an exhibition. And from the website you can see there's a description here that through the depth of interviews with current and ex-detainees, we capture narrators' histories, experiences and seeking protection in Australia and the detailed reality of mandatory detention. So we will be giving the Australian public an insight into mandatory detention, which they haven't had before. So there are 3 projects, I think, which are really talking about a new approach within the museum to the issue of immigration. So our challenge as museums is to maintain relevance and to be important places where we can voice concern, opinion, but also learn. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. I'll start with a question. If anyone's got a question they'd like to ask, can I get you to make your way to the mic? And while you do that, I'll just ask. David, you can't dictate to people what they're thinking, but you have to find a way to seduce them and get them to buy into your ideology. At the BBC, we're finding one of the challenges is in getting young audiences to stay with, because they are obviously the future, and Tate Modern itself, with its major development, has made youth their priority. How important do you think young people are in these ambitions for these culturally diverse museums?
Absolutely critically important, and we pitch a lot of what we do towards youth. We're fortunate that within Melbourne and Victoria, the state of Victoria, people, students and teachers come to the museum in droves. We get like 350,000 visits a year from school groups to the museums. So we have an audience there at the Immigration Museum of 40-odd thousand people. So we can quite easily tailor programs that the audiences do come to us. We have other programs as well where we extend the hours of the museum and engage with youth, etc. But principally, in a lot of these programs, we do rely on the school education system, where all of this is part of the curriculum, and they will then come to the museum, and we've got an opportunity for them to explore the issues.
We have a question, two questions from the audience.
Thank you so much. Thank you for multiple perspectives. My name is Amareshwar Galla, Australian citizen, Danish resident, working in India. And I have 2 questions. One is, well, first of all, I'll be a proud Australian, move back to Australia when I actually see an Indigenous Australian speaking at an ICOM conference outside Australia and actually registering and attending. I think we're always representing Aboriginal people in Australia in a very comfortable way, and I'll be a proud Australian when that happens. But my 2 questions are, first thing is that you all discussed different perspectives. You all commented on migration. None of you actually addressed the question of gender. None of you addressed the question of women, you know. And why is this, you know, sort of, we in museums, and there have been recommendations in our resolutions, so lethargic in addressing gender issues? My second thing, which is a serious concern to a lot of us, because nearly 91% of publications on museums are in English language. It has become an Anglophone world. And there are so many languages, you know, that people speak here, more than 160 languages people speak here. Are we in the danger of being, while we talk about diversity, you know, sort of very comfortable, seduced into a monolingual English world of museums? Questions to you.
Were they generally to the panel, or did you want to, any of you want to respond? Robin?
Happy to talk on any of that, Amar, but today the challenge was new migration, new challenges, and that's in 8 minutes. You really have to stick to the point. But I take your point that gender is a huge issue, and that would be a great topic for the next conference.
Any of you want to make a comment on gender or language?
Well, there are people far better qualified to talk about the representation of women in society than I am, so I'm not even going to touch upon that. But it's true, I have to echo what David said. That wasn't what we were here to talk about, so we didn't. As far as English is concerned, I regard that as a great thing, because a conference like this gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm very embarrassed that I only speak English, and I speak very poor Portuguese and worse French and worse Italian and so on. Like many English people, I do English. It's not the fault of the English, it's the Americans' fault. But it's a new imperialism. But seriously, it is becoming the lingua franca, which is of course in itself ironic, of the whole world. It does mean that we can have international dialogues, albeit in English, rather than having very few international dialogues, which is what used to happen a few years ago. So it seems to me that while there are certainly regrettable aspects of the English literary colonialism of the world, there are good sides to it as well.
Thank you. I'm going to come to our last question from the audience, but
okay.
They'll have time to take it up after, because we are pressured. I'm going to ask each of you to sum up, finally, what you think, how larger organisations can support smaller organisations, and what you personally feel are the priorities in moving forward for culturally diverse museums. But can I take the question from the gentleman?
Okay,
I wasn't going to miss you out.
Okay,
I just want them to think about it.
Okay, I'll keep this short. My name is Ian Jones. I'm from FUK, the former United Kingdom. Okay.
I have to put that on a T-shirt.
Okay, I'm trying to be Scotland. I was part of the Remain campaign out in the streets, a very depressing experience. How do museums persuade the resident population to accept migrants?
Giusi, would you like to start to answer that question?
Se parlo da sindaco di Lampedusa, per noi è una condizione un poco differente. Per noi, non essendoci migranti che poi rimangono a Lampedusa, la migrazione è un flusso continuo, è un continuo passaggio, e i conflitti non sono, quelli che possono sorgere non sono tanto tra i migranti visti come coloro che ti tolgono il lavoro, ti tolgono la casa, perché quelli sono temi che invece, temi di conflitto che si attivano dove i migranti si fermano, no? La meta, noi non siamo la meta, siamo il passaggio. Il conflitto che nasce nell'isola è semmai tra l'economia dell'isola, che è ormai sempre più centrata sul turismo, e l'immagine che i media, spesso amplificatori della propaganda politica, trasmettono all'esterno dell'isola. Un'immagine che spesso viene legata all'idea di invasione, oppure della morte, no? I naufragi vengono a volte raccontati come se poi a Lampedusa ci fosse il rischio di fare il bagno col morto in spiaggia, no? Per il turista, ecco, quando invece i naufragi sono a moltissime miglia di distanza dall'isola. Quindi per la frontiera, per noi, dico anche Lesbo, no? Per i luoghi dove i migranti non rimangono, perché non siamo noi la meta, i temi che possono, no, instaurare la fiducia, l'accoglienza, combattere le paure, sono diversi, sono legati a come si può gestire e governare la prima accoglienza, il soccorso, la prima accoglienza, uscendo dalla logica emergenziale, che è quella che crea degrado, disordine, e quindi che può danneggiare l'immagine turistica del luogo, e quindi sono differenti, no? I profili di veicolazione di convivenze possibili, no? A seconda dei luoghi. Sicuramente il tema della frontiera è quello più importante per far comprendere il dovere del soccorso, il dovere di salvare la vita umana, perché spesso la propaganda politica, quella che favorisce, no, i muri o il filo spinato lungo la frontiera terrestre, propone la soluzione lungo la frontiera liquida, lungo il mare, del non soccorrere, rimandarli indietro. Quindi questi sono i luoghi più importanti per affermare proprio il valore della vita umana, il dovere del soccorso in mare, il trasmettere appunto quanto sia stupida l'idea della frontiera liquida, del mare, no? Ecco, questi sono luoghi molto delicati perché si giocano proprio valori che vanno al di là della convivenza, dell'inclusione, dell'integrazione, eccetera. Quelli vengono dopo che abbiamo affermato una volta per tutte che le persone in mare si devono salvare.
Thank you very much. We are sadly coming to the end of a very, very thought-provoking session. Can I just have you, Marlen, David, and Robin, to give your final thought on the subject and how we move this forward?
Sorry. May I just... Hi.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry, I have a comment. Just a comment. I'm Patrizia Schettino, ICOM Switzerland. I have a comment about the value of the exhibition at the Immigration Museum in Australia, because at Melbourne, because I did my PhD about one of the exhibition Ancient MP. I collect data about this exhibition. And in 2010, when I was collecting interviews with visitors visiting the exhibition Ancient MP, this exhibition is about Indian heritage, Indian archaeology. And several visitors, they say to me in January 2010, it's great that we have this exhibition now in Melbourne. This was the kind of patterns, something repeated many times by different visitors, not only visitors originally from India. So I was wondering why, and then I discovered that a student, an Indian student, was killed in Melbourne. So there was a big discussion in media about this event, if it was racist or not racist. And what I want to underline that visitors from Australia with different cultural background, so not only the Indian visitors, they repeated many times how it's important that now at the Immigration Museum there is an exhibition about India. So this is in order to, coming back to the keynote speaker about the value of an exhibition, when there was discussion in the media about racism, about tension between Australia and India, and all this discussion about immigration, at the Immigration Museum there was an exhibition about Indian culture and Indian heritage. And how many times...
Can I sum up very quickly because we were seriously
yes.
run out of time.
I close this. How many times I saw Australians with different cultural background, like Indian background and British background, coming together and enjoying together the exhibition.
Thank you very much. Right, I'm going to give you 30 seconds just to give up your summation because I know there are other sessions to go to. Marlen?
Very, very quickly. I think that
I'm sorry, we can't take any more questions from the floor. We've simply run out of time. Just a quick summary from our guests.
I wouldn't agree more than what the mayor of Lampedusa said. We need to establish different solutions for different contexts. That's why I spoke also about context and process, because there is no one recipe for the problem. Every territory creates different challenges. What we need to do is to understand the challenges that every place faces and find the right solutions, and do this through cooperation, really share information from all over the world, do research, be open about it, be open about the problems we face. They're not all solutions easygoing.
Thank you very much. David?
My simple thought is that museums need to be more courageous and more active and less timid than they were traditionally. And if we can find ways to do that in this particularly difficult area, then we will, over a period, make an impact on things like public opinion.
Okay, and finally, Robin, last first.
Yeah, I think there are many, many different audiences, and what works for one won't work for another. So you really need to know your audiences, know what you want to do, where you want to achieve, and really start to take on some of these difficult issues. But do them in a way that is effective with the audiences that you want. For me, I think the answer to a lot of the immigration issues is around the basic humanity that we all share, and we share much more than we have differences.
Great, thank you, Giusi. We've had your comments already. Thank you all very much for being so patient with us. We have seriously run out of time. I've been told that I've gone over 10 minutes over our time, so I'm sure there'll be time to participate with our panel after this session. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your conference.